Hey there, friends. We're talking today about golden beads. Golden beads are truly a Montessori treasure. We can't wait to talk to you about it today. They are a staple for Montessori families all around the world, Montessori classrooms everywhere. You'll not go into a Montessori classroom without actually encountering on a shelf somewhere or usually on the floor with a child a set of Montessori golden beads. They're easy to DIY. You can make your own set. They're also easy to grab when you need to do a little addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division with your kids, which you will be doing often, especially if you're homeschoolers.
That's right.
And they are treasures. There's something to love and to be super proud of and to keep in a special place. And just know that they're always there for you to help you with your child's math. They're also great for adults. If you grew up doing math the old school way, where it was all on paper, lots of worksheets, you're going to find the golden beads especially illuminating. Because if you're not a math person who just has this ingrained understanding of what we're doing really when we're adding and subtracting, going back to these golden beads yourself, it can really give you a new understanding of math and a new appreciation of basic math. And so a lot of parents fall in love with them too for that reason. It's just another chance to grow as a human being with your child. So all that is to say, welcome to our show. This is Montessori 101, where we talk about the magic of Montessori, like these golden beads here. We actually believe every child deserves a Montessori education and that everyone can give their child a Montessori education. It's affordable and accessible for everyone.
That's right. I'm David. We're so happy to have you here. This is just one of the 21 essential materials that we think you should definitely have one form or the other in your Montessori life. And if you're interested in the full list of 21, we've been covering them in a series here. You can head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com/essentials, and get that for free. We have a list for free and a little checklist you can go through. But today we're talking golden beads specifically. Boy, these are fun. Let's see those golden beads.
They're so fun. Yeah. All right. So let me just show you the set. So here is just one little golden bead. And then we have 10 of them all strung together with wire. This is a set that I made for myself and our kids. And then we have 100 square here. So we've got one bead, 10 of them, and then 100 beads here. And then I actually have not made 1,000 cube out of these yet. It's on my to-do list, but I can show you. We really like actually using paper at home.
Yeah.
It actually works pretty well. So this is my 100 square in the digital version that David made for us to print. And this is the 1,000 cube that we can use to represent it in paper version.
That's right.
But the real version, usually I don't make, personally, I don't make more than just one representation of 100 square and of 1,000 cube. I think most children can get it and transfer their knowledge to paper. So,
yeah,
it's not a big
if
deal.
If you're at home, a DIYer, or just it's great to have a set, but paper can help. But
if you were in a Montessori school, you would often see these made out of wood. So like a wooden 1,000 cube, actually in cube form, and like a wooden slab that's a square for the 100 square. They might be made out of wood. But for home, you would just make them out of paper and print them. It's not a big deal. They do the same thing.
So what is the purpose of these beads?
Well, the purpose of them is to do some fun math stuff with them. Really, what we're trying to do is give children give our children some number sense, right? When we say that, we really mean we want children to be able to look around their world and see it visually in terms of like counting. So we want them to look at the TV over there and see visually there are 4 corners and like understand that the number 4 is the same as those 4 corners, which are over there, which is the same as 4 of these little golden beads, like just the single golden beads. So the development of that knowledge actually takes some time. It's not something that we can just teach children and then they've got it. It's not learning to count. So a lot of parents will think, well, I taught my child how to count to 10, so they have number sense. And that's not true. Number sense actually takes a while, and you've got to play around with quantities in a variety of
Mhm.
different ways in order for the child to get there.
Yeah, so like Aubrey was saying, these are designed to. There's different sets. You have the unit,
Mhm.
which is one. You would say one, but it's also two, three, four, right? You have a 10 bar, which is 10 of them together,
Mhm.
and then you have the 100. And you'll notice that we call this base 10 because that is the base unit here. And when you are going to make a larger set, like here, you're taking 10 sets of 10 bars to make 100 square.
Mhm.
And likewise, we don't have a physical 3D version of it, but you can get the same concept. Again, Aubrey showed you this picture, but again, what's important to note is that it's 10 bars or 10 squares, 100 squares.
100
Sorry,
squares.
it's 10 squares stacked up to make a cube,
A
a
1,000.
1,000 cube, right?
Mhm.
So the mathematical concept becomes very, very obvious within the materials themselves.
You can have another one.
I'll get another bead. That's a zero. Now it's one more. So you can see the mathematical concept. That's why there are the uniformity comes in as a factor. We think about other Montessori materials that are on our essentials list or otherwise, like the pink tower. It is very intentionally designed to have limited variation because we want to make it clear to the learner, whether that learner is an adult, and these are great for adults as much as they are for children, but children of all ages, that we want them to focus on a specific set of qualities. In this case, the idea that this is a unit, right? And it is an integer value that when you put 10 of these together, you get this, and that you could then break this apart and have a 10 individual beads. So if I wanted to make the number 21, I could have 10 bars and the single bead. Or I could have 10 bar and 11 of these individual beads. Or I could just have 21 of these individual beads.
Mhm.
And it demonstrates to the child how amazing it is that you can go up and down with these numbers and that they represent something concrete in our minds, which is really a big deal. You know, math is one of the last great things that we invented as a culture. You know, we had writing, of course, fire, the wheel, all that great stuff. But when you look at like the history of numbers and counting, it's actually a relatively recent invention. If you're doing Montessori lower elementary, you'll actually do that in one of the great stories, The Origin of Math and
Mhm.
Numbers, and it's one of the phenomenal inventions of humankind. But again, it's pretty recent, like thousands of years ago. But if you compare that to pottery or music or speech, it's very, very, very recent, right? That's because it's hard. And we still struggle with it today. So something like the golden beads, which helps us visualize that there are 10 of these little units to make this one thing. And this one thing, in this case, the 10 bar, is a unit in itself of a different type, a different kind of unit. And that itself can then be combined together to make a big square here, the 100 square, that there is a logic to it. And I can feel them, I can touch them, they have weight, they have temperature, and I could start to kind of get my head around like, okay, when I say 10, the symbol, I can actually visualize what that means. It means 10 of something. And I can break that 10 of something down even smaller.
Mhm.
So this is a way to help on that journey to abstract thought and using it with a concept, math, that is incredibly conceptual and pretty recent when you think about all the things that humans have done. So, how did Maria come to this idea? How exactly was she inspired to, or where did the idea of let's represent units? I mean, we've all been counting, right? If you've counted on your fingers, you've counted base 10.
Mhm.
But what gave her the idea, or what was she thinking when she went from like, okay, fingers to like, let's make these beads and then let's make quantities of these that we can really, really do a lot of fun stuff with?
Yeah, well, so you mentioned fingers, which is a great thing to mention actually, because it is just the original 10.
Yeah, base
We've
10
got
here, right?
10 fingers here, and we've got 10 usually 10 toes that children, and if children were in her school, they probably would have been counting on their fingers already. She would have been using that as a manipulative. But Maria Montessori was very innovative, and she loved playing with she loved just playing with the concept of something concrete to help children. And so you see it throughout all of her materials. You see the sandpaper for the sandpaper letters, that tactile feel. So there is really not a concept in the Montessori curriculum in primary, at least, that doesn't involve some kind of hands-on thing. So of course she was going to be looking for ways to help children add bigger and bigger and bigger numbers. So it's easy to add 5 plus 5 with our fingers. We can literally see it, or even like 3 plus 5, we can see it, we can count with them. But once you start adding like 8,152,
or how about 20? I mean, you don't have 20 fingers, so
that's true.
But that's the thing that's so clever, right? So we see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so the idea is like, essentially, what if you were to do this, right? So each of these bars has its own quantity, 10, and you could start to count them in the same way that you would just simply count on your fingers. Now I can visually see very, very quickly, I have 30, right? Which is the same as I have 3. That's why they're so cool.
Yeah.
So she was like, fingers are good, but I only have 10. So what if I wanted to do 5,000 plus 5,000? I need something else. And so then you get into cubes and things.
Yeah. So you can imagine Maria Montessori just sitting there, working with children, one child at a time, really watching them count with their fingers, trying to explain how, the concept of counting by tens, like skip counting, and the child just really needing more and more. And so usually when, as educators, our usual go-to is just singular objects. And so, we could say golden beads, but more likely, what are we going to use out and about in the real world? We're going to use something that we have a large supply of, right? So like maybe you've got a big supply of acorns outside, that your oak tree just fell. Gather those all up. Children love to do that anyway. And then you're going to be counting and playing with them. And you're probably going to, if you're wanting to teach children how to conceive of bigger numbers than just what they can count on with their fingers, you're probably going to gather them into little groups, right? And so you might gather them into groups of 3, you might gather them into groups of 4. But because of the counting system that we live in, that we do our math in today, and I can't remember do you remember who invented base 10? It's in the counting book that I read to our LE students every year. But whoever invented that long ago, it kind of took off around the world. It's not the only way that we
because
organize.
You could have base 3.
You can, and
you could have base 12. It doesn't matter.
Some cultures still use other bases.
Yeah.
But the Western world, most of the world uses base 10. It's just kind of what we have.
So it's a convention that we have 10. Like in another universe, an alternate universe, this could be 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it allows us to do more complicated problems by thinking of them in terms of place value.
Right.
And place value is the units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. And then 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, billions. Right. So you can just keep on going like that. And it's amazing for children because they really can, once they learn the place value system of base 10, and they start using these beads. Now ours only go up, our golden beads only go up to thousands, but other Montessori materials do go up a lot higher. So children could be doing, and they often do want to be doing, problems that are astronomically difficult, otherwise,
Yeah. Well, what I love about it, and just to underscore, is that what we're really teaching at some level is that this one bead is a representation of a thing that we're going to call 1. This 10 bar is also in the same way a representation. So these are equivalent in one sense. And so is This is equivalent in one sense. It's a representation of something, and this is a representation of something. But because they're uniform, you can start to see how this representation actually contains multitudes within it. And so you can break the 100 square into 10 bars, and you can break the 10 bar into units. And so you're creating in the mind that relationship of this is a whole thing, this is a whole thing, but this whole thing is contained inside of this whole thing as well. And that's kind of creates this, this is the journey to abstraction that's so interesting. We start to come up with a more literal understanding of, all right, the number 100 is actually just a container of smaller units that I can also visualize. And that makes math easier in the long run. That's why Montessori mathematics are so powerful.
It is. It's really cool. So here's Maria Montessori sitting with her students using something like acorns or rocks, stones, whatever materials are available to her, in the classroom that she's in or out in the courtyard that she's sitting in, probably rocks. And so she starts to use these materials with the children to help them with their math. And she starts noticing that she can group them into categories of 10. And then when they're grouped into little categories of 10, they can start to skip count with them, right? So you got 10 here, and 10 here in little groups. And then you can start to count them, skip count them,
Right.
10, 20, 30, 40. Right. And you can do this with any number. You can have a little group of 3, a little group of 3, a little group of 3.
That's right.
And you can count by threes, 3, 6, 9, and so on. So Maria Montessori was doing this anyway because this is what good educators do. They use the materials that are around them. But also there's something really significant that influenced the golden beads that Maria Montessori had with her. She was a Catholic, not just a Catholic by culture, but a devoted Catholic. And so she had with her, one would imagine at pretty much all times, a rosary. And I'll show you a rosary that I have here because once I started exploring the concept of a rosary, it really just came together with me how she really came up with this. So for those of you who are not Catholic, you can notice here's the basic structure of a rosary. Okay. It's kind of looks like a necklace, right? Like you could wear it if you wanted. You could also wrap it around your wrist. And I'm sure Maria often had hers wrapped around her wrist. Probably was just going about her day, observing the children, holding her rosary, or maybe it was in her pocket. But the rosary, there's something really cool about it. It is actually structured in groups of 10. So you can see they're called decades. And so here is a grouping of 10 beads right here. And then you've got a single bead in the middle. And then you've got another grouping of 10 beads here, another single bead, another grouping of 10 beads. And so if you imagine, math through the eyes of Maria Montessori, she's sitting here, she's got her rosary, she's used to counting by tens, saying the Hail Marys by tens. And then, maybe she starts to actually share this with the children too. And notice that when you line them up, you've got 2 groups of 10, which is 20. And friends, this is just the golden beads right there already on her rosary. And so it's not a hard stretch to imagine that she was we should make these for the children. But not necessarily as rosaries. We should make them individually. So that wouldn't it be great is if instead of using the rosary like this and having to demonstrate with the rosary, I could just have a 10 bar right here of just little beads. And so I don't know what the very first Montessori golden beads were made out of. I imagine that they were glass because I imagine that she probably used glass beads, but one doesn't really know. They could have been little wooden beads. They definitely weren't plastic back then because plastic hadn't even been invented. So they would have been made out of a natural material. And if you go to a Montessori classroom that has purchased, or if you yourself purchased a super high quality, expensive set of golden beads, they're most likely going to be made out of glass. And glass does break. So one has to be very careful with one's treasures when not to drop them on the floor or to let them roll away. You want to be very, very careful with your golden
I have
beads
no idea how you would drop this.
because they are made of glass.
Right.
So Livy asked a question. She said, "Are those the pony beads that I've made?" I have shown that set so many times, and I didn't grab it on my way over to my desk. But yeah, those pony beads work fine. These actually are a new set. They are made out of glass. I got these from Fire Mountain Gems. It was an investment. I purchased just so many of them because I wanted an enormous set of golden beads, and I just think they're so beautiful. They're actually the gold is painted on to these beads, so probably if they were handled many, many times over the years, probably the gold paint would start to kind of rub off, I imagine. But I have used golden beads from other Montessori companies. These are 7 to 8 millimeter big. So actually kind of quite large in your hands. The golden beads that I grew up with, using in my own classroom, they were smaller, so they were more like 6 millimeters. Doesn't really matter the size. It doesn't really matter the type of bead. It could be wood, it could be glass, it could be plastic. They don't even have to be round. And some Montessorians will disagree with me on this fact. I have seen all over the internet and been engaged in many a Facebook fight, which thankfully I do not engage in anymore. No more social media fights for me. They're not fun. But I know that many Montessorians have very strong opinions that your golden beads should be perfectly round and spherical because then they are mathematically correct. And I can even hear Maria Montessori saying this herself as describing one of the attributes of her own golden beads that she made and why they were so carefully designed. That being said, yes, if your beads are not shaped perfectly round, your square is not going to look pretty much like a square, right? It'll look a little more like a rectangle.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that doesn't really matter very much. What matters more is that we are understanding the concept that this is 1 unit, that this is 10 units just all together, and then this one is 100. And David also can show you how we can modify it to show that.
And so some of this would be harder to demonstrate if they weren't precisely the same. But my thoughts on this are the same. Like reading of Montessori's life and work, I think she would say that it's not the materials themselves that matter; it's the method. And if you got the right concept, so if let's say they were square, but they were all the same color and you could do the same lessons, we'll talk about those lessons now, then you're kind of getting at it. And more importantly, they're just super powerful, right? So what's better, to have an imperfect set or even a paper set of golden beads
and we often print them for our members when we create constellation themes.
That's right.
We will sometimes create math activities that one might do with golden beads, and David will just
I didn't drop those again.
David will create them digitally in order just to be cut out and printed.
Because at the end of the day, we don't want the material, the cost. We're trying to eliminate the barrier. There's something really powerful in the pedagogy here. And when we get hung up on the material itself, it can be a blocker to the child's discovery or the adult's usage of those materials. So for sure, we love our very beautiful and precise materials, and they do have magic, and they wouldn't be quite as wonderful or magical if they were just all sort of mass produced in some sort of way. But don't get hung up on that. Right, make the set, use a paper set, do what's available to you, and remember that the lessons, it's not the materials that have the magic. It's the methodology. And if you're helping your child make that transition to abstract thought, and even if your beads are not perfect or they're not even bead shaped, but they're grasping this conceptual idea of numbers represent a thing and that you can combine them in very special ways and that you can start to manipulate them, like break them apart and do counting and skip counting and division and multiplication and all the sorts of things that you're going to be able to do eventually with those beads, then you've got it. You've got it.
All right, so let's talk about a lesson. So there's so many lessons you can give with just the golden beads. I mean, they're very, very versatile. So I'm just going to give you kind of some insight into some of the lessons that we give. So one of the very first, ready?
Mhm.
One of the very, very first lessons that we give with the golden beads is simply to identify them and name them with the child so the child knows what they are,
Mhm.
right? So we call this in Montessori math, we kind of call it the introductory tray because you would take one unit bead and one 10 bar and 100 square, preferably the real life version instead of the
Mhm.
paper version, but
But
if you have a
again,
paper version, then paper version it is. And then the 1,000 cube. Okay. And they would be lined up. And I do not know how if YouTube flips our video or not, but they would be lined up with the unit bead on the right side, and then the 10 bead, and then the 100 square, and then the 1,000 cube. All right. So they would be kind of lined up from your right to your left. Now, this is actually super important. And if you're not used to using the golden beads, you're likely to reverse it. I have many, many times
so why is it
reversed
important to
them.
put them in that order?
It's really important because when you're writing a number down, say, we were going to write down
1,300.
1,100 and well, 1,111,
Mhm.
right? They would correspond to
Right, the 1,000,
if you were to
the
superimpose
100,
numbers over these, it
the
would
10.
look like the number
Right.
itself.
So
All right.
this
And
would
that's,
be 1,111.
yeah, 1,111.
Yep. And so
Okay.
putting them in this order is important because you're modeling the relationship to the number
To
itself.
the number. Yeah. All right. So it's just a concrete representation of the number. So you've got them in this little, you got them in a little tray or just on your rug. And then you're going to do the 3-period lesson with them. And the 3-period lesson, there's so many resources for that online. You could just Google it and get some ideas. But just to know the 3-period lesson, you would say, this is 1 unit, right? This is 110. This is 100, and this is 1,000. So you would be naming these things for the child. And after you had named them slowly, and maybe your child is repeating unit. Would you like to say the name unit? Would you like to hold the unit in your hand? It's so tiny, you're really exploring the materials. Then you start to kind of play with them. You say, would you hand me the unit? And then see if your child can look among those four items and then give you the unit, the right one. Would you hand me the 10? And, hand you the 10. So you're kind of playing with it. That's the second period. And then the third period is when you know that they can tell you what it is. So a lot of kids don't like to be quizzed. So if you say like, well, if you
Yeah.
say, what is this, which is the third period, and your child is in a good mood and they're having fun and they're playing with you and they don't feel judged, they'll say, oh, that's the 100, mommy. But if they're feeling a little judged or like, maybe I don't want to be tricked, are you tricking me?
Yeah.
Then they might refuse to answer, or they might say, you say it, right?
That's right.
So the third period can be a little tricky with that third period lesson, but there are fortunately, many ways to know if your child knows them or not.
Yeah.
Just by playing games, maybe you turn it around on them. You say, now you tell me which one to hand you. And if they say, please hand me the 100, mommy, and you hand them this one, and they burst out laughing and they're like, no, I'm in this one, then they've got the third period. Okay.
That's right.
So yeah, so that would be the very first thing to do with the golden beads at all. But there's so many wonderful things. So a couple more. I know we're at time. We've got to go. But you also could have your child bring a certain number of them. So you could
Mhm.
say, bring me 3 units. So you go from like bring me the unit to bring me 3 of them. Now bring me 4 units. Now bring me 5 10s, right? And they give you the 5 10s. And eventually, we get up to like 10 10s, and it would feel like a nice big stack in their hands, and they're just exploring the quantity of it. So after you've explored that, you are going to be teaching your child the concept of exchanging. And this is critical before you do any addition, any other operations with these golden beads. You've got to teach them how to exchange. And so what does that include? That would include them counting out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And then saying, okay, I have 10 of these, and it makes 1 10 bar. Okay. So these are the same. So if your child can understand that this little grouping of 10 units is the same as that 1 10 bar. And I think David is honed over and over again that point, during this whole video, because it's so crucial that you're actually teaching your child that quantity lesson of how to take these 10, put them away, and then exchange it for the 10 bar.
Yep.
Then they're really on their way to understanding Montessori math.
So it is so important to get to that conceptual part, right? But what I think is, I often myself will want to jump or forget this. We don't start with, this is a unit and we're going to make 10 of these and that's this. The first lesson is nomenclature. We call this a unit. We call this a 10 bar.
Mm-hmm.
We call this 100 square. And we're going to then practice and do the 3-period lesson on that. After that, we're going to then give them a chance to practice with those quantities without trying to think of them as subunits. So we're not trying to teach them that this thing, which we've taught them is called a 100 square, is 10 of these yet. We're just wanting them to get familiar with the unit itself, the thing itself. And then only after we're certain that they're really comfortable with it, then do we start to introduce that next level of complexity, which is actually this thing, which we've taught you about, it actually contains these things. So I think the point is that it can be really easy and exciting to jump to the end. Like, this is 100 beads. But where you want to start is, this is called 100 square. This is called a 10 bead. And getting them to be comfortable with that first, to sort of put that into the mind. This is like the essential, I think, in a nutshell, how Montessori learning tends to work. We teach them the nomenclature and working with the materials in order not only to be comfortable with the materials, but also to get them comfortable with the idea of the core concepts, right? So that when they get to the more complex parts, so now I want you to bring me 42, and they are having to figure out what combination of things might I bring then. And could I bring you 42 of these? Could I bring you some number of these plus these? Yes, you can. That's a much more complicated concept. You don't want to jump to that until they're really, really, really comfortable and happy with doing more basic things like bring me 10 tens, right? So these are awesome. I think for those of you who follow along, you know that I'm not a Montessorian by trade. Aubrey and I were both teachers. We were educators. I was a constructivist. I had more general philosophy about sort of this kind of thing, but I didn't know to call it Montessori. And so Aubrey grew up knowing to call it Montessori and really studying it. And over our time together, she taught me more and more about actually those concepts that you think are so amazing. There's this researcher named Maria Montessori, and this is the way she taught it. And it was like an aha. And the math materials are one of those aha things where you really realize, gosh, I wish when I had been learning math, because it was a real struggle for me, I wish I had been taught this, because it's conceptual. In fact, the new math, it's not so new anymore, but that concept of new math that it was all over the news 10 years ago. They made that. There's a really funny joke in Incredibles 2 about how do they change math? Math is math. Well, new math is basically old math. It's Montessori math, because what you're doing with new math is actually you're trying to teach the underlying concept. Yep. So these are really, really, really powerful tools, and the methodology is great. Now, again, you could use any number or any type of small object. I mean, and that could be fun. I remember once we used to have little bears that were all the same color, and because you're kind of teaching the idea of this quantity and so forth. But you got to have a whole lot of them when you want to do these lessons. And so beads are great because you can get a lot of them that are exactly the same. They string together if you buy this type of bead, or you buy your own set. Or to print out the paper ones. They're also really great to use beads instead of other objects because eventually you're going to want to use colored beads for doing other kinds of things. And it's a great way to sort of stair step up, right? It's a scaffolding to it. Bottom line, beads are great. Make a set. You can DIY them pretty easily. I guess you can go buy a set if you want. You could use a paper version of pinch, pony beads, glass beads, wooden beads, whatever is easiest for you. You could even use beans. I remember we used to have popsicle sticks. Remember, we used popsicle sticks for a while to kind of help with the bars. Didn't we use a popsicle stick to represent the 10 bar? I think.
Well, I use that in the classroom a lot. So it's a common 10 base 10 DIY for classroom teachers. So you get a popsicle stick and you can either draw on the 10 dots or you can like glue something to it.
You can print out a picture of the 10 and glue it on.
In the classroom, we actually have the children glue on like 10 beans, like 10 pinto beans onto one popsicle stick. And if they made 10 of those, then they have a lot to play with, as far as little 10 bars. But the beads if you use beans or corn or something, they will fall off,
They will.
So they're not a permanent. If you want something that's an easier DIY that's more permanent, I would just use Sharpie and just, use your popsicle sticks and mark 10 little dots on them.
Or print out something of this sort and glue it onto the stick. I mean, if it was a 10 bar. So there are ways that you can do DIY it. And again, the beads are great. I love the fact that, she was inspired by her environment and putting these things together. But what's important is that you're helping that child have a concrete relationship with a very abstract thing. So don't let the lack of precision or expensiveness or something like that keep you away from trying it out.
Yeah, I feel like every single child should have a set of golden beads in their home, whether they go to a Montessori school or not. If you are sending your child to a more traditional school, any kind of school, they're probably going to come home with homework sometime, or they're going to have a math question sometime. You're going to
bring home a worksheet. It's going to have multiplication, and you're going to have a set of beads, and you can say, let's make 3 + 7. And you grab those beads and you have a quantity of 3 and a quantity of 7, and you put them together, and it suddenly can snap in a way that maybe has never happened before. And so, traditional school or not, or even if you use those base 10 blocks, I know they sell, they're like plastic cubes and things, and you can buy those at a lot of different places. Having that quantity is super great. I love these things. They're great. What's your favorite material, isn't it?
It is one of it's hard to pick a favorite material. People always ask. I just can't. I would say, this is my favorite. And then the next time I do another lecture on another material, I'm like, this is my favorite. But it is definitely one of the favorites.
It's just so cool. It's something that represents that concrete, that abstract thing so concretely. It's brilliant.
So bottom line, do you need a set of golden beads in your home? Yes, you do. It is an essential, not only with homeschooling, but I really feel like they are such treasures. They are worth your time and attention to either DIY. I promise if you spend the time to actually purchase copper wire and learn how to bend it with little jewelry pliers, and string them on, or even if you use something like back our very first set of DIY golden beads we made together. I was making them, and I had decided they were going to be made out of pony beads. And so I just happened to have like a bag of pony beads at home. We didn't even have the right color or anything. And we came home, and I remember my mother and I were sitting in the living room, and we were like, we need something to tie this together. We're going to string 10 pony beads on something, and it needs to be like some kind of wire or something. And David was like, wire? You guys need wire? I think I have some wires. So he went out into our garage, got out this big tool chest, comes back in, and lo and behold, there's all kinds of wire in there. There's like wire that you hook up your speakers with. There's wire that you hook up. I don't know. You just had all kinds of electronic wire in there. But it was that speaker wire. And so we kind of dug through this big mess of wires, holding our pony beads and kind of like looking through, like, this is. And I remember my mother was like, this is not the kind of wire we were thinking of, because it's all
Yeah.
wrapped, it's like plastic
Yep.
and coated
Mhm.
wire. But finally, we found the speaker wire, which was together,
Yeah, the
like
left and right channel, and we
yes, like a telephone, like
Yes.
those old school telephone wire cords. And I remember my mother and I were playing with them, and they
Yeah.
kind of pull
Yeah, you
apart
pull
at the
them
top.
apart. That's right.
I don't know if you actually
Yes.
wire your speakers
Well,
by
you
pulling them apart.
Yeah. We'll save the speaker hookup for another time, but yes,
Sure.
you pull
All
them
right, so
apart
we
a
pulled
little
them
bit.
apart, and they were these plastic encased copper wire
Yeah.
strings, right? And so we just like pulled it apart and pulled it apart and pulled it apart, and then strung it through our pony bead, and eventually, usually with these golden beads that you purchase or you can make with regular strong copper wire, you actually like use your needle nose pliers and you kind of bend it into a
Yeah.
little twist at the top, and that way they don't fall out. But when we were playing with the speaker wire, it wouldn't bend
No.
and stick. It was floppy.
Yeah, it's right. It's not
So
stiff.
we
That's
realized
right.
that if we tied it in a
Yes.
knot, it would hold the pony beads on there. And so we were just delighted. We started playing with this concept and stringing in the pony beads and then tying, making these little sets. And they were multicolored because we didn't really have a proper set. And then we were so inspired. We went to the hobby store and we bought every color of pony bead we could find
That's
there.
right.
And I remember we tried so hard to match them up to the color of the Montessori colored beads, which you can DIY the same way. But the Hobby Lobby didn't have the exact colors of the Montessori beads, and so we were like, okay, so we got the lavender for the 6, but what are we going to do about this other bead? So finally, we did pretty much get to match the colors of the colored beads. But then we were confused about what to do with these beautiful golden beads because they're supposed to be golden. So we looked and looked, and like there was just no golden pony beads, but there were peach ones.
Yes, that's right.
And so we bought peach. And so my first set of DIY golden beads are actually peach colored, and they're still used in our house today.
Yeah, I was looking around. I thought we might have one.
I think they're in the
stray
other
one. Yeah.
They're in the other room, but they have been through. I taught in the classroom for many years.
You used them with
and then-
hundreds and hundreds of children,
did,
and
yeah.
then our own children.
and then our own children, and they're still in our house. I still love them. So that is to say that if you go to the great lengths to look through your boxes of wires or go to your hobby store and see what kind of beads you can afford, and I had zero budget as a public school teacher back in the day. Most public school teachers do have a zero budget. It all comes out of our own pockets usually. Just like parents. So just go see what you can afford, see what kind of beads are there that you could use. And the color does not matter. Like they could be the red beads that are the golden beads. They could be any color. They could be yellow. It doesn't really matter. Ideally, they would be a different color from your set of colored beads, which we will talk about another time.
Yep, we have that one coming up.
So to pick out a special color, if they can find gold, then get gold because they are treasures. And I think that there is also something about them being gold that makes them super special to children. They're so beautiful. Anyway, that's where we're going to end today.
That's right.
Thanks.
Don't let materials be a barrier to your giving your child the best education you can. It's so within your reach.
Absolutely.
Be creative. You can do it.
Love you guys.
So we're going to see you next week at 1:00. We have a Montessori Spotlight. We're going to be talking about how to help your little ones when they are going through a scaredy cat phase, which all kids do. And so if you'd love to join us, we'd love to have you. Don't forget, you can get a list at childoftheredwoods.com/essentials. And if you have any questions for us, hello@childoftheredwoods.com, or leave a comment on this video. We love interacting with folks.
All right. Take care, friends. Have a great day.
Bye.